When Chicagoans were getting acquainted with their new ballpark on the north side in 1914 and 1915, enjoying a baseball game from their obstructed view seats, a sweet and salty confection born out of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago was already enmeshing itself into American culture. 7 years before the opening of what later became known as Wrigley Field, a little ditty of a song made reference to that peanuts and popcorn treat. The song may not yet have been universally known, and it wouldn't be heard regularly in ballparks for another decade or two. But the amount of free publicity Take Me Out to the Ball Game gave to Cracker Jack at that time, linking it forever to what was becoming America's pastime, is incalculable. Those same 2 years, 1914 and 1915, Cracker Jack produced a series of beautifully designed baseball cards, Cracker Jack Ball Players, and included a card in each box. In 1915, customers could also mail in Cracker Jack box coupons for a whole set, and even a photo album. Eventually, the product moved on to other box prizes, but because of the permanence of Cracker Jack, not on the teeth, but as Americana, well beyond baseball, the Cracker Jack Ball Players cards occupy a uniquely special, even revered place, not merely in the card hobby, but on the overall collectibles landscape. Hey everybody, I'm John at Collect Cards, and I wanted to take the time to take a crack, so to speak, at an introduction to a video there. So that little minute and a half intro was my kind of segue into showing you a pretty special purchase I made a couple weeks ago, about 2-3 weeks ago. When the card arrived about a week ago now, and I'm really enjoying having it in my, it's not an old collection. I've only been back in the hobby for 3 years, but this is one of my more exciting purchases that I've made since I've been back in, and I'm pretty thrilled to show it to you here. And so won't take any more time, but building it up. I'll explain as I go in terms of why I picked it up. But here it is. This is a 1915 Cracker Jack card number 135, William Killefer. It's graded by SGC, as you can see, as a near mint 7. This is a pretty beautiful card. Not pretty beautiful. It's drop dead gorgeous, for lack of a better phrase. So this needed to get authenticated by eBay. I did buy it on eBay before I got it, so it's got the eBay stuff on it, and I'm actually going to take it out of here now. So it says void if damaged, I guess, for their eBay thing, but I'm just going to go ahead and open it now. Figure, got the video here to show proof that eBay indeed looked at it, and I still have the QR code here, but I want to take it out of this plastic now and finally enjoy it as it should be enjoyed. So there it is. This card is just stunning. I mean, the colors on this are fantastic. That red pops in the background, and then combined with the more maroon colored red of his Phillies cap and the lettering on his uniform there that you can see a hint of. I mean, I'll bring it up close a little bit more. These Cracker Jack cards are just quite something, and the fact that you can find them, the 1915s, which obviously this one was part of the complete set that was ordered through the mail with coupons, and I believe 25 cents needed to be thrown in there as well. It's actually on the back of the card that explains that. But I mean, just bringing it up close a little bit more, this is just, these are special. I mean, that's the word I used, one of the words I used in that little intro. It's just a fantastic card. The centering is great. The corners are really good. It's got a little bit of a little dot there, and the color bleeds a little bit there. It's not as perfectly even. But yeah, just quite something. And I would say all of the cards are great. They're beautiful. The design is iconic. I think some of the images are better than others, and in terms of the player photos or portraits that they just went and did the artwork for. I think this is one of the more stunning ones as well. So I'm going to show you the back, which I just banged it a little bit. I better be careful with my slab. Let me move this out of the way for a second. If you're not too familiar with the Cracker Jacks, also I mentioned that they've made them for 2 years in 14 and 15. The 1915 ones, the backs are upside down versus the front. That's because of the way the photo album was that you could get with this. It was like hinged apparently. I haven't actually seen a picture of it, but the album had some kind of hinge piece to it for each of the pictures, which I think was typical for back in the day. So you could sort of flip them over and then catch. So you kind of would do this and then do this to see the back easily. And so, I mean, the lettering on this is just, I mean, it's like it was just printed last week in some ways, except for the bottom. The bottom's got a little bit of ink blur or kind of fading a little bit, so that probably helps contribute to the 7 as opposed to, maybe even something higher. The back is also not, it's a little off-center to the left in terms of the back piece of this. And here's where it says the year of the album is 1 coupon and 10 cents, or 50 coupons and no change. And then the set is 100 coupons or just 1 coupon and a quarter. So that's where we're able to send it off. But so I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about why this card. You may have possibly gotten a hint if you know me, if we've either chatted before through comments or maybe we met at the National. You might know that I'm from Michigan, or I've also mentioned that on videos in the past. I'm from the Kalamazoo area. I live just outside of the city itself, but practically in Kalamazoo though. And the fact that Kalamazoo is on the card itself, which was that kind of struck me. And so I'll backtrack a little bit in terms of why this card. And then I'll give you a little bit of info on Bill Killefer as well. And I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. So basically, on YouTube, along with watching lots of card videos, and I love just discovering new content creators all the time, I also enjoy watching movie and music reactions. Just in the last probably 6 months or so, maybe closer to a year, I've kind of gone down those rabbit holes a little bit, and you watch a movie reaction to, I don't know, Raiders of the Lost Ark or Jaws or something in when I was a kid, Superman, and it's like the 1978 Superman with Christopher Reeve. And first off, you realize, how have these people not seen this movie? It can't be a real reaction. It's got to be, they had to have seen them. And believe it or not, that's one part of the passage of time that is just mind-blowing to me still. I've a couple of kids, one just started middle school. It's just in various ways you kind of you mark the passage of time. It's like, yeah, these 20-somethings or this 30-something even hasn't seen Jaws before. It's like, wow. And then when you see them uniquely frightened by it at the right times too, even now, 40 plus years later, almost 50 years later, when that movie was made, that's a sign of a darn good piece of filmmaking. Or when you watch Raiders and you watch the map room scene, which is quite possibly my favorite scene in the movie, when he sticks the staff in to see the exact map location on the model city in Cairo of where the Ark supposedly is. Like, to me, that's like movie magic, and you see like the reactors also seeing that for the first time, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So you just follow along, and so I've gone down those rabbit holes, and maybe you have as well. And so, one night I found myself watching Field of Dreams reactions, and long story short, the film still touches people in the same way. Perhaps you were touched as well, especially toward the end or at the end. And so it's an example of a timeless movie. If you're in the right mood for that movie, it's still holds a lot of power to it, which is it's kind of cool. The flip side of that, it's kind of cheesy in some ways too, but it's still Field of Dreams. It's Kevin Costner, it's baseball, it's James Earl Jones. The movie just still rocks in its own way. I mean, not like rocks, like Bull Durham rocks, Major League rocks, but in its own way, Field of Dreams is a jam, I guess you could say. And so I was watching that, and a big piece of that movie is about home and hometowns. Is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. For Kevin Costner's character, at that point, Iowa was home for him. It wasn't his hometown in the movie. And so it just got me thinking a little bit about, where I'm at. I grew up in New York, but Michigan in Kalamazoo has been my home for almost 14 years now. But at the same time, it will always be my kids' hometown. Also happens to be my wife's hometown. It's not my hometown, it's my home. And I love raising my family here. But so it just got me thinking a little bit. And for some reason, I found myself, Field of Dreams, if you remember the opening, also has the, when Ray Kinsella talks about his dad, John Kinsella, they show, he mentions how he's being put to bed, by his dad, to stories of Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, and Shoeless Joe, and they show Cracker Jack cards of the three of them, even though Cracker Jack didn't make cards for Ruth or Gehrig, of course, because given the years that came out. And the Shoeless Joe Jackson card looks strikingly like Ray Liotta, batting right-handed. But aside from that, they actually did a pretty good job. They used the same Shoeless Joe shot, just flipped it. The swinging shot you're probably familiar with if you know Cracker Jack cards. So it just got to me where it was like I like finding stories in my collecting, and if I can tie them to generations in some way that kind of touch me in a way, and kind of mark time in a way, I enjoy doing that. That's a part of the hobby. It's really esoteric, but that's a part of the hobby that I kind of have grown to enjoy. So that's why that's a big reason why I collected the 1954 Top Set, because, family members of mine were big New York Giants fans, and, they're no longer here with me. And so it's like, it's a way for me to kind of remember them, honor them, all that great stuff. Plus it's just an awesome set, and it doesn't have Mickey Mantle in it. So, it was an attainable set too. But so it made me think, like, seeing the Cracker Jack cards at the beginning of that again for first time in a while, actually, because I hadn't seen Field of Dreams in quite a while. And, made me think, like, yeah, those are just amazing cards. I mean, the tobacco cards of the era that came out a few years prior, they're great too. Fantastic, even. I really like the T205s with the gold borders in particular. But the T206s are all-time classics. But I was like, you know what? I want to just explore Cracker Jack a little bit more. So I did. And I can't remember how it came to be that I found this card, knowing that he was from Michigan, in Kalamazoo, no less. He was born in Bloomingdale, Michigan, Bill Killefer, and which is about 30 or 35 minutes away from where I am, same side of the state. But he started his playing career with the Kalamazoo South Michigan League Club, which actually is technically right, but actually not 100%. He signed with them, but never actually played with them. They actually dealt him to, I believe, the Jackson Michigan Club, which is a little more toward the middle of the state along Interstate 94. So there is I'm going to start segueing now into his biography, and because I want to try to wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. There's a fantastic biography of this really, like, he's not an unknown ball player, but he is an unsung player from his day. There's a great bio of him on the SABR website, Society of American Baseball Research, so I highly encourage you, if you're interested to know more about him, to give his bio a read. So long story short, with Bill Killefer here, his main, like, claim to fame, I guess you could say, was he was the battery mate. He was a catcher. He was a fairly light hitting catcher, not a completely inept weak hitter, but he was not a power hitter or a big hitter by any means. He's more like a 240, 230, 250 kind of hitter, singles and doubles mostly, and it was the dead ball era. He was the battery mate for Grover Cleveland Alexander, basically his personal catcher, and as well as he was the main catcher for, in this case, the Phillies, and then later the Cubs as well, because both he and Alexander were in the same trade to the Cubs, which I'll touch on in a minute. But they teamed up for 250 games. 250 times they went to the field together as battery mates. And so, Grover Cleveland Alexander is one of our game's all-time greatest pitchers. He doesn't get lost in the conversation when you throw the names like Walter Johnson and Christy Mathewson and Cy Young out there. But, if there's just one more spot on that, Rushmore, so to speak, he might occupy that fourth spot in that era. He won 30 games 3 straight years, from 1915 to 1917. All 3 years he won more than 30 games. This guy was his catcher. And the Sabre bio kind of notes how being a defensive-oriented catcher was even more important then than now, because power wasn't a factor of the game. You had to manufacture runs. And so you needed to throw out base runners, and you needed to just, keep runners on, making sure people aren't advancing, and just being the role of field general as a catcher arguably mattered that much more back then. And apparently he, at least in the National League, he was like defensively, if not number one, considered in the game as defensively at his position. He was like among the elites. And so let's see, the Phillies, I'm looking at some notes I took on my laptop here alongside me. The Phillies went to the World Series in 1915, managed by a person named Pat Moran, whose card I actually have and I showed in a past video. It's the only T206 card I have currently. So those 1915 Phillies were managed by this guy. This is a 2 that I had graded a few months back. So just an interesting coincidence that I happen to have that card as well. Maybe I should become a Phillies fan. I don't know. So managed by Pat Moran, and they lost that World Series in 1915. But they were eventually traded together by the Phillies in 1917, at the end of 17, or early 1918. Basically, Baker, the Phillies owner, they played in the Baker Bowl, which, apparently was one of the smallest bandboxes, maybe the smallest bandbox at the time, in the National League anyway, especially, I believe, in right field. Small dimensions. So they were, but basically, apparently Baker needed the money. Similar, I guess, to the a couple years later for the Red Sox owners selling Babe Ruth essentially to the Yankees. And what do you know? In 1918, led by Grover Cleveland Alexander with Bill Killefer catching, the Cubs made it to the World Series in 1918. They lost to the Red Sox in that series. Couple of other notes on Mr. Killefer here. He actually was, again, this is all taken from the Sabre bio, so credit to them. All credit to them. He actually, in 1914, see if I got this right, I think it was at the end of the 1914s. He was either at the start of 1914 or start of 1915. That year I don't have, but he basically, the reserve clause was just getting going at that point, obviously. And he was reserved by the Phillies, but he went ahead and signed a contract with the Chicago Whales of what was then kind of like it was the Federal League, which was kind of like, a startup league or an outlaw league, depending on your viewpoint. It was basically a third league, a third major league trying to get going. He signed a contract with them. And then the Phillies ended up making him a better offer, and he re-signed with the Phillies before that season started. And the Whales actually took the Phillies to court. And basically, in the end, the Phillies prevailed. He stayed with the Phillies, but he was toying with the reserve clause back then, which is pretty fascinating stuff, actually. I think it's just an interesting story there, or another interesting wrinkle. Some other things about Bill Killefer. He managed in the 1920s and the 1930s for the Cubs and the St. Louis Browns. Didn't have a lot of success as a manager. But he also didn't have great teams either to work with. I believe he may have been a player manager at the very start of his time managing the Cubs in the early 20s. He also served as a coach for many years. He actually crossed paths professionally with Rogers Hornsby, and he was a coach for one of Hornsby's coaches for the 1926 World Champion St. Louis Cardinals. So in between his managing stints of the Cubs and Browns, he coached for a bit, and he was on a Cardinals coach, and so he ended up getting a World Series ring as a coach. But interestingly enough, he has also crossed paths professionally in his 48 years in baseball. Crossed paths with the likes of Branch Rickey, Bill Veeck, and just other big names. He is credited with the development of Hall of again, notes from the Saber bio. So again, all credit to them. But he's credited for the development of several big-time catchers in like the 30s and 40s, including Hall of Fame catchers Gabby Hartnett and Rick Farrell. He had a hand in kind of like their development, I guess specifically defensively in particular. And he also served as a scout near the end of his time in baseball. He was a scout for Cleveland and was involved in the signing of Larry Doby in 1947. So this guy did a lot in baseball, which is just fascinating stuff. And his brother, Wade Red Kilfer, also played in Major League Baseball for a time. An outfielder and maybe a little bit better of a hitter than Bill here. But in the end, I think probably Bill has the more notable career overall. And really, he, again, born October 10th, 1887 in Bloomingdale, Michigan, died July 3rd, 1960 in Delaware. I didn't jot down the town in Delaware that he was in at the end there. But a long time ago he passed away. But lived a good life, a very good baseball life, that's for sure. Quite the baseball life. And so I just, this card just kind of reached out to me here. I'm at 20 minutes, but if you're still following along, I appreciate that. I'll kind of just show the card a little bit more. It's just the fact that I was able to get this in a 7, and it was in my budget for a big purchase that I was able to make. Is it impacting some other stuff in terms of me doing some hobbying? Yes. So my, I'm still following through on my 78 Topps Hall of Fame runs. Those are 15 or 20 a pop, 25, 30 a pop, maybe at the most as we start moving into some of the bigger names. I'll probably start getting some 7s as we go, and that's totally fine. But this was an opportunity that, I was just inspired. And I just felt like the time it was just sometimes, you're in those, you find yourselves in any aspects of life, not just, enjoying your time in the hobby. There are times when you need to act, and this was one of those times where, to me, this card was special on a number of fronts. Whether I like, right now I'm thinking like this would be a card I'd love to, show to my kids at some point when they're a little more interested in kind of the real nuances of what I'm doing in the hobby, and I could share this with them and mentioning just how, here's an example of a player who excelled at his game. He's from our hometown area originally, way back in the day, over a century ago, and this card looks like it was, just came in the mail, I guess. It didn't come out of a pack. It certainly didn't come out of a box of Cracker Jack. Those cards have a lot of caramel staining on them, and, I might look, is there going to be another Cracker Jack card in my future someday? Yeah, there might be. If the budget ever allows, that would be, probably years away if I ever were, because there's just too many other things in the hobby I like to explore. But in the last few months, this was one of them. One of the things I wanted to explore to see if maybe I could add a Cracker Jack card to my collection. And I managed to do it, and I found I was incredibly lucky to find this one. Let's put it this way. Oh, some PSA or SGC stats I wanted to give you really quick before I end this. Pop counts for this, which I maybe should have shared earlier. For SGC, there's a pop count of 3 for this card. As a 7, there are 4 higher. 3 of those are 8s, and 1 is a 7.5. None higher graded by SGC is an 8, than higher than 8 for them, out of a total of 47 graded by SGC. PSA, not too many more graded, actually. 69 total graded. So between SGC and PSA, Beckett probably has several as well. I didn't check them. But between PSA and SGC, we're only talking 116 total graded cards currently of this player, of Bill Killefer. There are 13 of those 69s are graded near mint 7. 18 of them are higher. 2 of them are mint 9s. So there are 2 mint 9s of this card, at least 2, if not graded by anybody else, that are floating around, or more like tucked away securely in some very lucky collectors' collections. But yeah, so there's some info there on pop counts. So that's it. I wanted to just take some time here and share a special purchase I made. And it's it's more of it's not an investment, but it's just a special piece of the collection that I was able to add. So very happy about it. And again, if you followed along this far, thank you very much. I hope you found this entertaining piece of your baseball card rabbit hole for the day. So with that, I will wrap it up. Take care, everyone. Enjoy these last home stretch, these last days of the regular season. Looking forward to the playoffs. Should be pretty good stuff. Well, maybe not for my team, but the Yankees, they're having a miserable season. But I think the playoffs are going to be quite something to watch. So with that, take care, everyone. I'll see you on the next video. I'm about to open a pretty special card here. Here it goes. Oh my goodness. That is just a thing of beauty.